Getting started, I want to formally welcome you to the JTA. This is the Southern Group. This is the on-site interview in reference to JTA RFP number P-19-025, State Government Affairs Services. My name is Darren Parker. I'm the Contracts and Procurement Specialist. We'll go ahead and introduce the committee and then we'll turn the floor over to you.
I'm Ivan Rodriguez, Director of Government Affairs.
Jessica Shepler, AVP of Public Affairs.
And I am Richard Clark, the Capital Resource Officer.
Thank you for being here today and really appreciate you making the drive over. Basically, the way that we have been, the format that we've been kind of operating under today with each group is just giving you a chance to kind of open up. And I know that you all received a list of questions beforehand. If you want to touch on that during, this time that you have, that would be great. And then we'll have a couple questions just afterwards. That's sort of how it's been going. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for having us today. This is a huge deal for our firm. We've been really excited about this opportunity for a while now. You guys, JTA is a well-known, well-respected organization in the transportation space and are in fact outpacing your peers in a lot of the initiatives that you guys have going on. We're excited to share who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and how we think we could be a great partner with JTA and the direction that you guys are looking to go in Tallahassee. So I'll first start by introducing myself. I'm Rachel Cohn, the Managing Partner of the Tallahassee office of the Southern Group. I am also, for the purposes of a JTA engagement, the client lead. So I would be your primary point of contact for lobbying engagement in Tallahassee. A little bit about my background. I spent 3 years prior to coming to the Southern Group at the Department of Transportation. I was the Assistant Secretary for Finance and Administration, where I oversaw the department's work program and budget and other functions as well. I also served for 8 months as the Secretary when I had to shepherd the legislative agenda and the budget across the threshold during the legislative session. And then prior to that was Governor Scott's Deputy Chief of Staff, where I managed a suite of 14 agencies. DOT was one of them. So I've been around state transportation issues for about 6 years prior to coming to the firm. So lots of expertise in that. I actually spent 10 years in Jacksonville as well, working for a previous mayoral administration. So some of my my background is local government and specifically here in Jacksonville. And I think with that, I'm going to introduce for you guys the folks that are here in the room. Paul Bradshaw is our chairman and founder of our firm. We're a firm that's been around for 20 years. For the purposes of a JTA engagement, he would be one of our policy and trends lead. Brian Batista on this end of the table is also another member of the policy and trends lead for the purposes of engagement with you guys. He's an attorney by trade and works a lot with our disruptor clients, clients who are looking to push new and innovative things at the state legislature level. So you will hear some of that from him and some of our experience as a team as it relates to that. And then last but not least is Erin Rock, and she, before she came to the firm, was the Secretary of the Department of Management Services. So her expertise is procurement, government services, communications. It's been 16 years, right? 15 years. Bumping you up in state government, so it has lots of relationships both in the legislative side of things but also in the executive side of things. Two of the team members that you see on the screen here that are not here with us today but are offered as part of the JTA team are Chris Dudley and David Browning, and those two are our legislative leads, guys who've been doing it for a long time. They are doing what our firm does in the off season when the legislature is not in town, doing lots of political events, fundraising activities that helps bolster our activities as a firm when everybody is in town. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, who's going to give you kind of a history of our firm and insight into the culture that we have.
Well, thank you for allowing us to be here today. It's a privilege. I'll be brief, but I think it might interest you to hear a little bit of the origin story of our firm, because I think it kind of illuminates where we are today as a firm and what we have to offer prospective clients. So our firm began slightly over 20 years ago. I had been a lawyer who had practiced administrative law for about 13 or 14 years. I had been in state government for 5 years and outside of state government in everything from small to large law firms, including Foley & Lardner as the largest, which I think has a significant Jacksonville presence. And so when I decided to become a lobbyist, it was evident to me that the existing business model for lobbying at the time had been outpaced by government itself. If you look at Florida government has a budget that's about 10% of the GDP of the state that it spends directly. And on top of that, it controls an extraordinary portion of the budget through its regulatory systems beyond that 10%. And if you look at the outsized presence of Florida government and the complexity of Florida government with 25 executive agencies, 160 legislators, offices spread through the state, it was evident to me at the time that the existing model for lobbying really didn't fully serve the client's needs. So we began building what at the time was an extraordinary innovation, which that is a broad team of lobbyists with subject matter expertise in Tallahassee that could cover the full waterfront of state government. You'll find at the core of our firm sort of three principles: a dedication to that type of innovation. So when I say, we built the first broad team, we didn't stop there. We went on to build the first, I think, credible network of offices throughout Florida. We currently have 6. We built a network of offices throughout the Southeast United States because there are some synergies that you get in adjacent states. And as a result of that approach, along with applying the other principles in our firm, over time we've built a firm that now has more than 30 lobbyists throughout the Southeast, more than 300 clients, and a real track record of success for those clients over more than 2 decades. So innovation is at the core of our firm, and that's also coupled with a true, authentic, real team approach by our lobbyists. I suspect a lot of people will come into you today and say, we have a team of lobbyists and we serve your needs. But what you'll sometimes find with these firms is, while it is a group of people, it doesn't necessarily operate as a coordinated team all the time. We do operate as a coordinated team. Everything from the structure of our firm to our firm culture constantly reemphasizes the need to operate as a team. With a government that large, with issues this complex, you simply, if you want to go fight a war, you're going to need an army these days, and we provide that army. So, for example, every week, all of our lobbyists throughout the network get on the phone. We've invested a lot of money in, technology that allows us to do teleconferencing, video teleconferencing, and things like that. So they're either actually or virtually in our presence all the time. During the session, our lobbyists come in from all over the state and live in Tallahassee as well as committee weeks. There are a number of benefits that you get from that team approach. For example, legislators are actively legislating, assuming the session doesn't run over, for only 2 months a year. They have some committee weeks when they're in Tallahassee, but most of the time they're back home in their home districts. And when they're in their home districts, that's a time where they're really ripe to be lobbied, frankly. There's not 50 people beating down their door in the Capitol. They have the time to consider reasoned argument. And so our network of offices around the states allows us to reach them at any time throughout the year. Sort of the third tenet of our firm was a maniacal dedication to serving our clients. And as a result of that dedication and cultivating that approach with our lobbyists, we've had many clients now 20 years on a month-to-month contract. And we would like to think some of the best of breed clients out there. So those are sort of the 3 principles: innovation, operating as a team, and a very client service organization. And with that, we would love to apply those principles to you and help you achieve your goals. So I think Rachel is going to talk about some of the relationships we're able to cultivate as a team.
So one of the questions a couple of other questions actually that you all asked to us to be prepared to answer ahead of time related to key relationships. And for us, relationships is currency in our business. And we are a large team, but we lobby a large state government as well. So we have to be methodical about how we do that. And what you'll see on the slide is just a small selection of people that would be critical for JTA to know if you want to move appropriations asks or legislative asks or executive branch asks. And so this is by far not, of course, the whole scope of the group, but this is just what I would consider your transportation specific audience. Beyond this, though, zooming out from this, as a firm, we spend a lot of time in the off-season, as Paul mentioned earlier, building relationships with every member of the legislature and every major decision maker at state agencies, including cabinet agencies. We actually, every lobbyist in our firm has an app on their phone where we keep what we call our relationship matrix. And it has every member of the legislature, key staff in the legislature, key staff in the executive branch, and every lobbyist in our firm has to go through and rank their relationships 1 through 5 with each of those members. So if your lead lobbyist, you have an issue that's going through session and a representative from Miami is the deciding person on whether or not your issue gets on the agenda or not, I don't have a personal relationship with that lobbyist. Our Miami office does, typically, or somebody at our firm does. There's virtually no decision maker in government that we cannot get to ask something of. And not any one person can't do that on their own, and that is the power of our team and the big differentiator between us and other firms. Because no one small boutique firm can do that either. It really does take living and breathing and going to church with and soccer practice with these members, and we do it in Tallahassee with the executive branch, and building those relationships over time. So the first time you go and ask something of them, it's not an ask, it's a relationship that's already been built. And so for clients who are, one of the questions that you asked is how do you handle an issue, a client that has limited relationships but has big asks or big issues that they want to tackle? Well, on day one, and we've experienced this with a lot of clients, coming in new to the state, even, they get to rely day one on our relationships that we have already built as we work to build your relationships that are important to you and to your organization. And so, yep, I think I covered that. Let's make sure there's nothing else on here. Well, as you can see, executive branch decision makers, I know that you all know Secretary Tebow, that there are 3, and I want to drill down on DOT specifically. The 3 assistant secretaries in central office make a lot of the decisions and have the ability to override to some extent district decisions. And it's important for you to have a relationship with Greg Evans, your District 2 secretary, but it's just as important to know the other levers to pull within central office if you get hung up at the local level. And having, lived and breathed in that organization for 3 years and then spent a lot of quality time with it outside of that when I was in the governor's office, our team knows who within that large agency, can actually make the decision and get to an answer quicker. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Brian, who's going to talk about some of our work in transportation and in transportation innovation specifically.
Yeah, thank you. So I think if you were to do kind of a word cloud of this at the end of it, you'd probably see like innovation would be this big at the end of our talk, right?
Favorite words.
Favorite in a good way, or?
Well, we use it all the time.
Yeah.
We do too. And I think that is what candidly will make us a good culture fit with you guys, right? Innovation is core to what we do. I think innovation and disruption is in our DNA. In the legislature, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Senator Jeff Brandes. He's been front and center on a lot of the AV issues, the EV issues. So Brandes has this saying that you may have heard, but there's 2 types of organizations, right? There's frontier organizations and fortress organizations, right? And a fortress organization or issue is where you're protecting an entrenched interest at the legislature. A frontier issue is where you're trying to do something brand new, right? And you're trying to innovate and it shakes things up and kind of scares people. That's what we love to do, right? It's core to what we do. It excites us. It gets our whole team engaged and energized. And frankly, that's what we're really excited here talking to you guys about, because you guys have done a great job of being that in the transit space. You guys are way out in front on these issues. You have big, bold visions. We would like to be behind help pushing those, and I know our team would do a great job because it would energize us. Up here, we've got a sampling of a few of our clients. Some of them are just disruptors in general, but most of these you'll see are disruptors in the transportation-specific sectors. And I think it shows the extent that we've been engaged with these new transportation issues in the state over the past several years. I don't know that there has been any big innovation or policy change in the issue that we haven't been in the middle of because of client. And for you guys, we think this kind of critical mass is a great network and synergy for you guys to fit right into, right? We're in the middle of these conversations right now, but the voice of a transit agency, is something that would be great to interject in and something that we think we could do a great job with. We think a lot of these are complementary to what you guys are trying to do. Our client Embry-Riddle, we do a good job of getting them at the Florida Autonomous Vehicle Summit every year to get up and talk. Something that I don't know if you guys do, but it would be great for you guys to do as well to show you're kind of a leader in that space. Represented Tesla for many years, right in the middle of the AV/EV issues every year, and we intend to be this year as well, as EV should be a pretty big deal going into this year. Root is a tech insurance company that has to do with auto, really cool. Wheels, micro mobility, just all we have all sorts of exposure to all these different innovative transportation sectors. And then last, I'll mention Lake Nona, which is a master planned community in Orlando, which is working with BEEP. So we've been working very closely with BEEP and with Lake Nona to pull down funding and to help move that project through. I know that kind of dovetails with a lot of the things you guys would like to do. It's those experiences that we could kind of take into a future representation and think we could really hit the ground running working with you guys.
Or just indirectly through Lake Nona?
So yes, yeah, I think that's the correct way to put it. Yeah.
And is BEEP's involvement in that AV related?
Yep, BEEP is running AV shuttles in Lake Nona right now.
Okay.
So we represent the property developer of Lake Nona, but their relationship with Lake Nona, BEEP and Lake Nona are so close. We work hand in glove with BEEP as well.
Okay.
So have worked really closely with them. And then that I talked a lot about kind of the policy stuff that we're in on, the disruptive policy stuff. I mean, just as important to a lot of our clients are the appropriations issues. And I mean, the TED budget is a battleground every year, and we think we do a really good job of going in there and finding ways to pull some funds out for our client. Over the past several years, in an area around here, we were successful in getting $4 million for Williamson Road. Have gotten $5 million road appropriations in Hillsborough County in the recent years, and so a little different than what you guys do, but it's playing in the same sandbox, and so feel really well equipped to go after some of that stuff for you guys as well.
And just to add on to that too, you guys have been the recipient of a lot of federal funds. There's a potential for legislative appropriations, which Brian was mentioning. But I also think that there's a really interesting opportunity for an organization like yours to sort of reconfigure DOT's thinking on how they fund transit at the state level. And that has always been, having sat at the leadership table in that agency, that has always been a point of contention from the big metro areas of the state and to the rural. And it's interesting because you guys come from District 2, which is one of the more rural districts, but you are dealing with a Miami issue, which is kind of exciting and an opportunity all in one. And transit organizations, would come to and still come to ACTA, and we need money for operations, and it's not there at the state level. Yes, for capital projects to some extent, but not to ultimately what we're going to need to solve traffic flow problems in some of our more urbanized areas of the state. But you all also have an opportunity to pitch yourself as, an autonomous vehicle, innovative organization that FDOT is very eager to partner with. FDOT is specifically over the last couple of years itemized $20 million annually for pilot projects, for autonomous vehicle projects. I don't see a difference in what you all are trying to accomplish at DOT and what the city of Gainesville might be trying to accomplish. You're trying to solve the same problem. It's the last mile issue in some instances. And I think thinking creatively and thinking differently about, how you can draw down additional state dollar resources, we think we're well positioned to help you think through that and know the right people at the agency to make that pitch and how to make that pitch. So that goes to that. So with that, Erin is gonna talk about really what you could expect from us in terms of our communication and how we work with clients. And you'll find in the folder that I gave you a lot of examples of what she's going to mention, so if you want to flip through as she talks.
Erin, I realize that you are the person in this photo with
Yes.
the long brown hair.
Yes. We've gone through a lot of hair changes in the last
More
6
innovation. Yeah, right.
Big ideas. Well, and so that's a great segue. You've heard a lot about big ideas and innovation and how that relates to the culture of our firm and how that drives us. But, those big ideas, we're big thinkers, we're fearless in that respect. We have to do that well, but we also have to do the day-to-day well. As a client partnership relationship, you have to have the communication that you need in order to feel successful as an organization, and we strive to make sure that you have the information that you need. And we've created multiple vehicles to make that a reality, so I just want to take you guys through some of what we do. Some of them are a little bit more creative, and others are bare bones and brass tacks, and you should get it from any lobbying firm that you utilize. So if you're not, you need to call us. When it comes to regular activities with session, weekly bill tracking is something that we strive at. We are extraordinarily diligent in our tracking of the legislative process. We want to make sure you know what's going on, the latest and greatest, and we commit that to documentation. So it's not just related to phone calls, it's not just one-offs, hey, did you hear about this thing? You need documentation that you can provide up and down the chain within your organization, and we make sure that you have it so that the communication is that much more seamless within your organization. We provide committee meeting summaries in an extraordinarily detailed manner. Not only do you have the link to the meeting itself and a transcript of that, you get the Q&A that's offered by the members. You have access to their bios if you need to pull that up immediately. We try to make these communications as easy to follow as possible so you have everything that you need right there in a tight little package if, in fact, you want to take this documentation and forward it on to somebody else in the organization so they're informed about what just took place in the meeting. We provide post-session board briefings for all of our clients, so whomever within your organization or leadership structure wants to better understand what's evolved over the course of session, how things ebbed and flowed, and at what point there were new and interesting issues that had to be resolved, we provide a complete post-mortem. So you will have an understanding post-session about the activities that we engaged in, how we communicated, and where, and we can also provide some insights into why we think what happened did and how we can be prepared for that, either to overcome or to celebrate as a success moving forward. We also have some more creative areas. We participate in what we call policy think tanks that we host ourselves. We have fantastic relationships with members, and they lean on us a lot to dissect policy options and talk about what could be. We're known as a big thinking firm, and so we have a lot of communication from legislative members around the state about what could be. What we try to do through policy think tanks is unite our client base across the board in opportunities to talk with legislative members or to collect ideas amongst themselves in ways that they wouldn't normally do. There are ties across the education space and the innovation space, the tech space, and the tourism space about how we can better develop the workforce of Florida for tomorrow. We recently held a policy think tank on that, specifically tying clients in those spaces together so they could have meaningful conversation with each other about how their issues intersect with one another and how they could potentially create policy proposals or bring ideas forward to legislative members that would have even greater traction because it's a larger group of surrogates in support. And we'll be continuing to roll those out over the next several months. We've got some great ideas there. We also host industry-specific webinars. So for our clients who are in similar spaces, we pull them together for opportunities to hear the latest and greatest about meetings that are taking place across the state, whether that's task force meetings, workshops hosted by agencies or outside entities, or legislative committee activities, so that they can hear what's been going on and how it may impact them, but also discuss it with other vendors in that space and talk about potential opportunities to move their issues forward in a positive way. And then, of course, we're constantly on the lookout, as Brian mentioned, to the opportunity to create thought leadership opportunities in conferences, in venues that maybe vendors would normally consider, inserting them into committee meetings on the agenda where they can present about their latest or areas where they've had success across the country and where it may have bearing here in Florida. We excel at that. Members are always excited to hear from us when we have innovative ideas or presentations that may benefit their committee members, and it's something that we enjoy doing as well.
Conflicts.
Oh, yes, of course. So one of the questions that you raised was, in a firm of our size, how do we handle the conflict issue? And so one thing that I think is incredibly important, again, and speaks to our culture, is the integrity of our organization is extraordinarily focused on providing the best long-term representation that we possibly can for our clients. Every relationship has a beginning point, and we don't see an end point. We want to stick with as many people as we can for the longest period of time possible, and our track record speaks to that. One of the reasons that we are so successful is because we're extraordinarily diligent in the conflict check process. Every single partner in the firm is a part of our internal process to ensure that we don't have issues from the onset of a potential client onboarding. We ask key questions, and through our regular communication and staff meetings, we work through issues at the onset and then throughout the life of our relationship with our client. We expect complete and total honesty, and that goes both ways. So if there's an issue that's developing or an area where our clients are leaning into and innovating, which of course we support, we're very forthcoming with our fellow partners about how this may have impacts in that space and things that we're going to need to talk through with our clients to understand where the dividing lines are or are not. We're extremely successful at this, which is why we have so many clients who've stuck with us for the duration that they have. The nature of that communication is extremely important to us, and I think that that's unique to our firm.
Have you, if I might ask a question, have you ever had a situation where maybe initially you didn't really, there maybe wasn't a conflict, but then you ended up having two clients already on board existing and where conflict was created, or there became a conflict along the way?
Yes, I am sure that has happened, and the way that we handle that is when we learn about it, whether it's from the client or we just intuitively know, because we do have regular meetings with all of our team members. I know, even though I'm not working on that client, what that client's priorities are. And so when we either identify it ourselves or it's identified by the client as a conflict, we put the clients in charge, and we let, ultimately, if there are issues that we are typically able to manage through, we tried to rack our brains to think about, is there an instance where we've dropped a client because of a conflict? And we really couldn't think of one, because typically it goes back to scope. Is there scope creep on the part of one client or another? But ultimately, as Erin said, we're upfront about this client's position on the issue and your position on the issue. And ultimately, if that is a deal breaker for a client, we let the client make the decision about, do you want us to further push the issue? And if you sign on with us, any client that comes after you, you get to be able to call a conflict on. You say, we were here first, this is really important to us, we don't feel like we can work past the issue, and then we move on. And we won't take clients that we do know are inherent conflicts with existing clients.
The answer is, it has happened probably fewer than a half a dozen times over 20 years, because we do the thorough check up front. But it has happened, and usually it happens because there's sort of mission creep with a client. We don't start out where there's an immediate conflict, but sometimes they change their business model, and that can create a conflict.
Thank you.
Sure. That's really the wraps up our presentation. You've heard a lot from us about how we do things and what we do. I hope that we've conveyed to you our excitement about the opportunity of working with JTA and an organization like yours. We think there's a ton of opportunity in Tallahassee to partner and to be a thought partner with you as well. And so we look forward to the opportunity. Any other questions that you have, we're happy to answer today.
I've asked similar question to all of the firms who are here to present today. What is your thought about an approach regarding, so we obviously have the U2C, which is our Skyway conversion into autonomous vehicle technology, where we take the existing Skyway, remove the beam, create a roadway there to run an autonomous vehicle on. Eventually, that's 2.5 miles. We eventually want to expand the 2.5 miles to 10 miles into kind of the local urban neighborhoods, San Marco, Riverside, 5 Points, Springfield, up to it's not UF Health, it's not called Shands anymore. Anyway, and so that's kind of our vision for the U2C. We right now estimate, or we're told that it will cost around $300 million to fully build that out. It will be a network of AV vehicles, more on-demand type service. So that's kind of a work in progress. We received funding at the federal level for the first phase of that. We also are, so we've at least started down the road as far as funding goes for that particular project. Right now, we're also talking in very early discussions about commuter rail from St. Johns County, which is fastest growing county.
Third in the country.
Third in the country, probably, I'm not sure in the state where it lines up, number one in the state. So we're looking at bringing about commuter rail between St. Johns County and Duval County. So I kind of wanted to, and that has a similar price tag to it too. So I just kind of wanted to, get your initial, just off the cuff thoughts on two big projects, that kind of approach. Obviously, we've got to get a lot of the funds at the federal level, but state is critical to us from matching those federal funds and being part of that.
So what I would say, I mean, a $300 million project is no small thing. That's a huge project in the DOT space. That would be a project that we would probably consider looking at a P3 for, just on our own. I would say prioritizing and being able to articulate why you've prioritized. Ultimately, if you feel like you've got more ridership, the revenues make more sense on the commuter rail from St. Johns County to some of the more the downtown and the more local connections, then that's your better argument at the state level for being able to draw down dollars. You're solving a critical need that exists today, and financially. You have to be able to make that financial case for why you're asking for the money, even with DOT. And the legislature too. They're going to want to know what your ROI is on all of the projects that you put forward. But like you said, you're phasing in your U2C project. You're not trying to bite that whole elephant off at the same time. Eat the elephant, eat the whole elephant. And so that is what I would say. I mean, you have to prioritize and phase. And this is something that's going to be built out over the next 10, 15, 20 years, not something that you're going to go ask the legislature for in year one. So we can, in thinking through what your planning efforts are and involving us in that, so we understand what your priorities are and what your timing is, will better help us and help you guys on strategically when to ask for what at the state level and who to ask it of. There are completely different projects that I would ask the legislature for a line item for, than I would ask the department directly for.
And I'll add too, I mean, So we work best with our clients when we feel like we're on the team, right? We're in constant communication. We're not just advocates for you guys, but we can also be advisors and kind of help on some of the strategic things Rachel was mentioning. I mean, we've been through very similar things that you're talking about before. We represent the city of Orlando, worked very closely with them on Sunrail, on getting that project in. So, I mean, it's all of that history as well. I mean, just being in constant contact with you guys and helping to kind of download our experiences having gone through something like this before, where we found it was successful, where pressure points were that we might not have suspected, but for having gone through the process once before. So I think we can bring all that as well and work very closely with you on that.
I mean, there's evidence that, regional transportation projects, regional transportation issues can be dealt with through the legislature. They can be navigated safely to everyone's edification. We saw that with MCORs and how things are evolving, and it takes champions in the legislature. It takes extraordinarily strong relationships among, your advocacy group and the members across the board. Decisions around regional transportation won't just be region specific. You'll want your champions within the region, your delegation to come forward and speak on your behalf and be empowered with incredible information that we can help to craft. But you'll need to gain additional support across the board, and that's where our regional offices and those relationships can really come into play.
What are your thoughts as it relates to, Rachel, especially yours, because you were the secretary for a little while. We've sometimes, and so we're a state agency, right? So kind of a sister agency of the FDOT. What are your thoughts? We've sort of had our hands slapped before, and I know the city's had the same situation too. We've had our hands slapped by FDOT for kind of circumventing the district office and even maybe the FDOT altogether by seeking funding through the legislature. And FDOT's position's always been, it's coming out of this pot of money anyway, so, whether you ask us for it or whether you ask the legislature for it, it's all coming out of here, so, you know what I'm...
Why don't you just work with us and go through the process?
We want a yes.
100%. 100%. And it's actually even more of an issue like with port funding and stuff. But transit funding is similar. And so I think you cannot surprise DOT on a legislative ask because they were 100% run to the governor's office and ask for a veto. So there is a lot of work that you have to do up front that can be done. And there is a way to do that, to work to at least, bring the department in on what your issue is, and they're not going to be your champion. They're not going to run across the street and ask the legislature to disrupt the work program, but they're not going to stand in your way. And I think one of the ways that you can do that is what I mentioned earlier, thinking creatively about the pots of money that you are seeking. If you're seeking transit, there's a very long-established process. You got to change a lot of minds. You got to run up a lot of hills, in order to do. Not that any of that's impossible, but there are also other opportunities because of the initiatives that are specific to the U2C and the autonomous vehicles initiatives that you guys have. Where you have a broader opportunity to seek funding in other areas that are not disruptive to the work program, that are not specifically tied to projects and programmed 5 years out, where some of your transit projects, which is when you go in there and ask for money in year one and they get mad at you because you were supposed to wait till year 4. But there are nuances to getting and help, and DOT ultimately wants to solve the problem you're solving, which is traffic management and traffic flow. And so it's just making sure that you can pitch it in a way that doesn't disrupt all the other projects that they have going on. Sometimes it's also finding your champion within DOT. And it's not always the person that you're supposed to talk to.
And within the governor's office.
Right.
I mean, the DOT is an extension of the governor's office, and so when you have a champion at the highest level of government, you've got more likelihood of success. So part of what we do when we sit down with a client to strategize about any major communication or initiative we want to push is ID all those stakeholders, rank those stakeholders, who's going to whom first, and in what order, how do we need to make this work, what are the key message points where, and then we deploy and make sure that we send the best representatives possible to handle that communication and the timing of that communication as closely as we can to the plan. which as an engineering organization, I imagine you guys will appreciate. It's always good to have a plan.
We really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming
Yeah.
over
Yeah,
today. It was
appreciate it.
very nice to meet the team in person, and so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely, really appreciate it.